Hello everybody, my name is Firestar, and welcome back to RPG Horror Stories. Today we have some interesting DMs and players. We have one player who thinks that Dungeons & Dragons is just for the calculations, and we have a DM who thinks that travel time should happen in real time. I hope that you all enjoy your stay, and let's get into it. Our first horror story is titled, My DM Thinks That Turn-Based Combat Isn't Just a Game Mechanic, but Something That We Actually Do. Posted by you/MobileDay6192. So obviously, in-game, turn-based combat is the only way to do things, because if we didn't, we would be screaming over each other like wild animals. During a time-sensitive mission, the DM described a golem boarding a location that I wanted to enter. I split off from my party members, as my character often did, to breach the area. Don't worry, my party has a sending stone with my name on it. We knew the dungeon would begin to crumble when we took its treasure, so the party had said that they would contact me when the process began. Insert a fight with a golem guarding a poison-filled stockpile that I wanted to enter. The party messaged me before I was done and said that the 10-minute timer had begun. Perfect. I have a scroll of Dimension Door, and this felt worth wasting it on. I was going to wait until the very last second. Well, the golem was described as getting weaker, and because its attacks rely on poison, to which I was immune, the fight was not going well for him. So, he decided, on his turn, that he was going to do nothing. I laughed and began describing my turn because doing nothing means he's turn skipping. The DM stopped me and began laughing as the golem described that as long as he doesn't move, we're both stuck there, as he does not plan on ending his turn. I asked what the canonical reason for me just sitting there and letting this happen is, and the DM said, combat is turn-based, you can escape outside of your turn, and said that this was the true trap of a golem, then just moved on. I was confused about what was going on as the DM described before I could contest the temple falling apart. I rolled death saves, a nat 1 and a 7. I was just dead, because apparently this is like Pokemon. According to the DM, my Yuan-Ti poisoner is a polite little gentleman, taking his kindly patience and waiting for the golem that he planned on killing, then robbing, to take his turn. This was after being openly told that the golem doesn't plan on doing anything, and my character and the golem just standing there and waiting for everything to fall down around them. And yeah, that's a little bit insane. A bit of a crazy ruling there by the DM, because it's very bizarre to assume that combat is actually real-time turn-based, and that characters would just wait for one another to finish because they're oh so polite in following these rules. I could see it if it was maybe somehow like a world-building thing, where you build up this combat system, you have to take turns, I don't know, but just throwing it in there randomly for Dungeons & Dragons just to, like, kill a character because, God forbid, the DM can't do damage to him, because, oh no, the character is immune to poison, which is the attack that the golem has. It sounds to me a bit like DM versus player mentality there, where the DM could not handle just taking the L and hitting the character with something more deadly down the line, because let's be honest, Dungeon Masters have all the control. If he really wanted to beat this character, he could just wait until later and have something bigger and badder show up. Our next horror story is titled, An Old DM of Mine Ran Traveling Sequences in Real Time. Posted by you/Kaiser von Fluffenberg. So, this was about 1.5 years ago now, and this particular player, who's actually a very nice guy, albeit a bit of a strange D&D player, is still part of our group, but no longer DMing. Now, as a dungeon master, he had quite a few strange quirks. For example, he insisted that we have extremely long shopping sprees at the start of a session, combat could last literal sessions sometimes, and he sometimes played Fallout while running a session. Now, one of the strangest quirks that he had was that when we were doing a travel sequence, he would sometimes just sit in silence for almost 15 minutes, and when we asked him, "Are we there yet?" he would answer, "Almost," and sit in silence for a little longer. We all thought this was strange, but I eventually realized it was because he was actually giving time for our characters to reach their destination, rather than just cutting to the arrival at the location. Eventually, we as a group decided to give him some advice on his DMing, and he made the effort to actually improve. The last part of his campaign was amazing, and everyone really enjoyed it. He sometimes even runs one-shots when I, the current DM, am unable to attend. It's really cool to see how far his storytelling skill has come, but I still can't help but think back and laugh on some of his more peculiar eccentricities. And some of the comments do have some funny things to say. This is amazing. A group of adventurers in a carriage just staring awkwardly at each other for however long, played out for real over the table? Perfect! Why, what else would you play D&D for, honestly? Next time his player takes a long rest, the DM and the other player should just stare at each other for 8 hours. It will be excruciating for everyone involved, but totally worth it. Now, it is good that the DM actually did take advice from the players and improved his DMing. We hear a lot about DMs just ignoring players and any advice and just continuing on with their horrible DMing and awful just rulings. And it is kind of funny that this DM decided that travel time should be played out in real time. I'm not really sure what would influence someone to make that decision, especially if roleplay isn't really happening at the table, which it doesn't seem like it was according to the OP, with how they would just stare at each other silently. I can see if they were actually role-playing and maybe like getting into their characters, talking with one another, but if they were just staring at each other for 15 minutes, it's almost a little funnier to imagine that going on. Our next horror story is a repost from somewhere else that I'm not sure where, but the title is This Guy Sounds Like Fun, posted by u/scabbers. I need to vent. I play D&D because I like making calculations. Education based on probability distributions, calculating distances and encumbrance effects on movement, working out magical effects consistent with the laws of the planes, and looking up events and encounters on random tables. Yet, somehow, D&D is now taken over by cosplayers and actors. Why do such people choose to play D&D, which mostly has rules for what I just listed earlier? D&D sucks now for that, and economic incentives from this. Why don't you go play Fate Core, or Hillfolk, Dungeon World, or even Storyteller WOD games, which doesn't have any numbers or calculations and is geared towards story and roleplay? Just one of those fiction-first type of games. You don't even need a rules system, just LARP. But I guess the reason is you just jump on the latest buzz and most popular thing out there. You buy Apple products, drink Starbucks, and obviously you play D&D. Now I think it speaks more that they censored Apple and Starbucks, which is an interesting choice, but you know, to each their own. And it's very bizarre that this person is so heavily gatekeeping Dungeons and Dragons, because I understand to a degree if you've been in a fandom or some kind of hobby for a very long time, and then it grows in popularity and you start seeing it go somewhere that you don't really enjoy. But in the end, popularity is good for hobbies and fandoms and things that you enjoy because it keeps it alive and it keeps new people interested and putting back into the community. If we did not have such a large tabletop community, then we wouldn't have as many creative people as we do now. It would just be very basic, I think, and I don't think it would be nearly as fun. And I think that, sure, there are a lot of new players who might get into Dungeons and Dragons, especially from things like Critical Role, like popular media like that, and maybe they get the wrong idea about what tabletop is, but if they are introduced to it in a better way, then it really just brings new people to the hobby, and I think that that's a lot better than trying to gatekeep and say that, no, you can't play, because you're not doing it the right way. It's a fantasy game. We're all just using our imaginations anyway, who gives a shit? If you want to use D&D just as a gateway to do calculations and math, go for it. But, Dungeons and Dragons is also about roleplay, storytelling. I don't really understand where this person is coming from, saying that Dungeons and Dragons should just be for calculations. Our final horror story is titled, DM has been lore dumping at us for 90 minutes straight, and he's still going. The original poster of this was deleted. Now, I'm not against a 5-minute lore dump to get some context, but this is fucking exhausting. The Skype call started more than 90 minutes ago now, and our DM has told us the entirety of his homebrew world, creation myth, factions that fought in ancient wars, where every deity and race comes from, everything. I like world building myself. I run a game with a homebrew world, but I would never lore dump like this. This is ridiculous. This is making me want to call the game off. The DM is not a stranger, or else I would have left 10 minutes in. But he's a friend's husband, and I'm sure that if I say something, I will be starting shit in the group. Now, the DM is going over every homebrew race and subrace, their abilities, skills, traits, culture, and how they get along with other races. 90 fucking minutes. I could have watched a movie in the meantime. Edit. It's from his fucking novel. Now it makes sense. I am not going to play with this guy. Edit 2. 2 hours. It has been 2 hours total. I still have no idea how the game is actually played, and I am not going to remember the different gods, who have brothers named whatever, and a second cousin once removed named ba-ba-ba. Just 2 useless hours. Thank God it's over. And oh my god. Like the OP said, I also enjoy world building myself, but 2 hours of lore dumping, I would be happy to keep my players interested in my world for more than like 10 minutes. Not that they wouldn't pay attention, but there is just a time and a place for that. And it's all from your novel, too. Shouldn't you actually, give your novel to someone who's interested in that, instead of forcing your players to sit through and listen to all this world building? Because, unfortunately, the truth of the matter is, when you create a homebrew world, even when you put hours, days, weeks worth of work into this world, it does not mean that your players are going to be interested in every little thing. They are not going to care about this god who has a brother or a cousin, what their backstory is, because realistically it is not going to affect them. And they are not trying to write a novel themselves. I personally am a note-taker, and I know that if I was playing with this DM trying to write everything down, I'd be fucking exhausted before we even began the game. There's no fun in it, and then you have to, God forbid if you have to know some obscure lore that he dumped about 10 minutes in during the game. That'd be miserable. It'd be miserable not only, looking back, but just trying to recall what importance it has. And the truth of the matter is that most of this is not going to be important to the actual game. And if it is, then you can explain that when the players are actually playing the game and when they get to the part that it's important at. Do not lore dump at your players, basically just reading them your novel for 2 hours. And that will do it for our episode of RPG Horror Stories. I hope that you all enjoyed. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Have a good one.